3:47 a.m. over Moscow, when radar screens began to flicker with faint echoes so faint that operators thought they were birds. Yet birds don't fly 380 kilometers per hour in formation toward the heart of Russia's energy network. Within seconds, those birds became the most successful Ukrainian drone assault ever recorded inside Russian territory, a strike that would cut Moscow's fuel supply by nearly 40% and ignite political tremors from the Kremlin to NATO headquarters in Brussels. According to reports later confirmed by Reuters and BBC, monitoring the attack involved a coordinated wave of UJ-22 Beaver drones, each programmed for autonomous low-altitude penetration. Russian S-400 missile batteries outside Ryazan, the same systems touted as the world's most advanced air defense, failed to detect them until it was too late. By the time the lead drone climbed briefly to 800 meters for its terminal run, the missile crews had just 14 seconds to decide engage or hold. They fired. Two 48 N6DM interceptors roared into the night, but the drones dove to 200 meters, slipping beneath the radar horizon. Millions of dollars in munitions exploded harmlessly into empty sky. When the first Beaver slammed into the Ryazan oil refinery at 3:52 a.m., the shockwave registered on seismic sensors 40 kilometers away. Three more drones struck in sequence, igniting vast petroleum reservoirs. Within 90 seconds, a cascade of explosions consumed 140,000 tons of fuel, creating an inferno so intense it glowed on weather satellites. Fire brigades were powerless. By dawn, analysts from Defense News reported that output from Moscow's western refining sector had collapsed by nearly half, forcing emergency fuel rationing across several regions. The timing could not have been worse. Global crude prices surged 4% by midday as markets reacted to fears of disrupted Russian exports. Under President Donald Trump's administration, the U.S. National Security Council issued a statement framing the event as evidence that Russia's war machine is straining under its own inefficiency. European officials quietly celebrated the blow to Moscow's wartime logistics, while NATO intelligence sources, quoted by Deutsche Welle, suggested that Ukraine had received broad technical guidance from Western partners in planning the mission, though direct operational support was officially denied. What stunned defense analysts was not just the success, but the sophistication. Each drone appeared to exploit radar blind zones mapped from previous reconnaissance flights. The pattern suggested algorithmic precision machine learning applied to warfare. A British military analyst told The Guardian, "This wasn't improvisation, it was engineering evolution." The implication was clear: low-cost Ukrainian drones were now defeating systems built to intercept hypersonic missiles. The wider impact rippled far beyond the fire. Within hours, the Kremlin convened an emergency energy council. Russian state media attempted to downplay the losses, calling the blaze localized. But satellite imagery from Maxar Technologies contradicted the claim. The western section of the facility was obliterated, its pipelines twisted like molten wire. Economists estimated direct damage exceeding $250 million, with reconstruction expected to take months. The Ministry of Defense ordered redeployment of several S-400 and Panzer S-1 units from frontline positions to protect key industrial hubs, inadvertently weakening Russia's battlefield air defense grid in eastern Ukraine. For Kyiv, the symbolism was electric. Officials hailed it as proof that Russian infrastructure was no longer untouchable. Yet behind the triumph, NATO analysts warned of escalation risks. A desperate Kremlin might retaliate against Ukraine's power grid or even target logistics centers in neighboring NATO states. The question now dominating strategic circles was chilling: if drones could reach Moscow, where would they strike next? And as smoke continued to billow across the early morning horizon, the next phase of the operation was already unfolding hundreds of kilometers away, where radar screens in Novokivoshchsk lit up with what appeared to be incoming cruise missiles. How do you think Russia will adapt its defenses after such a stunning failure? At 4:03 a.m., while the flames near Ryazan still clawed at the horizon, a second wave of drones approached the Novokivoshchsk oil refinery, one of Russia's largest refining complexes and a critical node in the country's fuel export network. This time, Russian air defense forces believed they were ready. 3 Pantsir S-1 batteries had been strategically positioned in a triangular formation, their radars overlapping to provide seamless coverage. Each system could track up to 20 targets and engage 4 simultaneously. Theoretically, no drone should have survived the approach. But what followed instead would expose the structural vulnerability of Russia's air defense doctrine and rewrite modern electronic warfare textbooks. According to early assessments from Defense Express and Military Watch magazine, Ukrainian planners had anticipated this layered defense and equipped the incoming UJ-22s with a deceptive payload corner reflectors, triangular sheets of aluminum designed to reflect radar waves straight back to the source. When 4 of the 12 drones suddenly climbed to within 500 meters, Russian radars screamed, "Cruise missile detected." Their radar cross-section had ballooned from 0.1 to nearly 10 square meters, mimicking the profile of Kh-101 long-range missiles. Panic followed. Within 12 seconds, 8 57 E-6 missiles each, costing nearly $400,000, launched into the night sky, streaking after ghosts. As Reuters later confirmed through satellite data analysis, the reflectors multiplied the radar images exponentially. Russian systems saw targets where there were none. 4 became 8. 8 became 16 until the screens were littered with phantom signatures. Analysts from Jane's Defense Weekly called it one of the most effective radar deception operations ever conducted using sub-$50 components. Meanwhile, the real attack had already begun behind the defenders. While operators watched their radars fill with fake cruise missiles, another 8 drones flew just 50 meters above the ground, hugging terrain contours and evading detection completely. The fatal flaw in the Panzer's design lay in its physical constraints. The radar turret could only pivot 45 degrees electronically, requiring mechanical rotation to scan behind a process that took nearly 5 seconds. It was 5 seconds too long. When the alarm finally came, the drones were already inside 1.2 kilometers. The Panzers fired, but their missiles failed to arm in time. The proximity fuses required 1.5 seconds of flight to activate. The twin 30mm cannons opened fire, spewing tracer rounds at 5,000 rounds per minute, but the drones employed dynamic altitude variation, rising and dipping unpredictably between 40 and 80 meters. The computers couldn't predict the pattern. Hit probability dropped from 83% to 31%. 7 drones slipped through striking fuel tanks and loading terminals in synchronized detonations. By dawn, the Novokivoshchsk refinery was engulfed in multiple fire zones, forcing the shutdown of its export pipelines to the Baltic ports. The blaze burned for nearly 2 days. The New York Times later reported that Western energy markets absorbed the shock with temporary price surges, while Moscow rushed to divert crude from other facilities, exacerbating logistical chaos. The attacks also revealed a deeper shift. Precision was no longer reserved for expensive Western missiles. It could now be achieved by low-cost Ukrainian engineering. In Washington, officials under President Trump were briefed that night. A senior Pentagon analyst quoted by Al Jazeera described the event as proof that asymmetric warfare has matured. Cheap drones are now rewriting the cost-benefit equation of modern conflict. NATO's intelligence units assessed that Ukraine's operations had demonstrated a strategic penetration capability deeper than any previous strike, forcing Russia to defend every refinery, airfield, and depot simultaneously. The propaganda war also ignited. Russian state outlets declared victory, claiming most drones had been neutralized. But social media videos from residents told another story: colossal fireballs lighting the sky, emergency convoys rushing through smoke, and the unmistakable silhouette of refinery towers collapsing. Analysts in London observed that the imagery, instantly viral, carried an impact far beyond tactical destruction. It was psychological warfare on a national scale. As the fires dimmed and the world debated what came next, one question lingered across Europe's defense corridors: if deception could so easily blind Russian radars, what would happen when Russia deployed its electronic warfare behemoths to fight back? Could Russia's powerful jamming systems finally turn the tide, or had Ukraine already anticipated that too? By 4:18 a.m., the night sky above Voronezh was deceptively calm. But hundreds of meters below, 6 Ukrainian UJ-26 Beaver drones were flying blind. Their GPS signals vanished in an instant, their communication channels fell silent, and their navigation systems flickered into chaos. Russia had just activated its most formidable electronic weapon, the Krasuka-4. This mobile jamming complex, mounted on an armored truck, flooded the electromagnetic spectrum with 500 watts of directed interference across frequencies from 0.1 to 18 gigahertz. To put that in perspective, a GPS satellite transmits at just 0.0025 watts from 20,000 kilometers away. The Krasuka's signal was 5 quadrillion times stronger. As one Western analyst told BBC defense correspondent Jonathan Beale, it's like trying to hear a whisper inside a jet engine. Within seconds, the drone's sensors spiraled into confusion. Digital compasses spun uncontrollably. The onboard gyroscope's fallback instruments meant to guide them in GPS-denied conditions began to drift. Inertial navigation was useless beyond a few minutes. A 10-degree error per hour meant a potential 200-meter miss after 68 minutes of flight, a catastrophic margin in precision targeting. The drones were now operating in what Pentagon specialists call an electronic shadow, a space where signals die and machines must rely on themselves. Ukrainian engineers had anticipated this possibility. Drawing from field data and Western research shared under NATO's Defense Cooperation Program, the drone's software had been upgraded with an emergency AI-based pattern recognition system. Using infrared imagery and shadow geometry, it compared the visual environment beneath to preloaded satellite maps, like a pilot flying by memory in total darkness. But it was costly in processing power. As temperatures inside the drone's microprocessors soared past 95 degrees Celsius, the onboard CPU began throttling to prevent meltdown. Each degree lost meant slower pattern matching, slower decision-making, and certain failure. At that critical moment, the AI locked onto a distinct geometric clue: the triangle-shaped shadow cast by 3 storage tanks at the refinery. The system recalculated its position, with a margin of error under 5 meters. One drone moments from shutdown transmitted that single coordinate burst 128 bytes of data using a desperate maneuver, frequency hopping spread spectrum, a NATO-inspired technique that shifted the transmission across 1,000 frequencies per second. The Krasuka couldn't jam them all. In that 1 microsecond gap, the message broke through. The others received it synchronized and adjusted course. At 4:20 a.m., the lead Beaver struck Tank 7, the weakest structural point of the Voronezh refinery. The resulting fireball engulfed the entire jamming vehicle seconds later, forcing its operators to flee. Eyewitnesses described the night turning as bright as sunrise. Reuters satellite imagery later confirmed total destruction of the Krasuka-4 and nearby fuel reservoirs losses exceeding $25 million. Analysts across Europe and Washington were stunned. For years, Russia's electronic warfare units had been considered nearly untouchable. The Krasuka was designed to blind AWACS planes and cruise missiles. Yet here it was, outmaneuvered by $70,000 drones and open-source AI. NATO's electronic warfare specialists began revising their doctrines overnight. A report from Defense News quoted a senior U.S. Air Force officer: "If this is what Ukraine can do with off-the-shelf tech and algorithmic ingenuity, imagine what NATO could do with full integration." President Trump's administration, briefed that morning, reportedly praised the innovation of allied engineering and quietly accelerated a joint research initiative between U.S. defense contractors and Eastern European drone manufacturers. The event was seen not just as a Ukrainian success, but as a live demonstration of Western technological dominance in adaptive warfare. As the Voronezh blaze lit up the sky, Russian command scrambled to deploy reinforcements. Yet the real danger wasn't the drones themselves, it was the strategy behind them. Ukraine wasn't just hitting refineries, it was dismantling the psychological foundation of Russia's air superiority, proving that invisibility and intelligence could outmatch brute power. But as dawn broke, Moscow's generals began preparing for the unthinkable. Their most fortified base, the Primorsk-Akhtarsk airfield, Russia's Shahed drone stronghold, was next on Ukraine's target list. Could Ukraine's low-cost drones really penetrate what the Kremlin called the most secure airfield in the world? At precisely 4:32 a.m., radar operators at the Primorsk-Akhtarsk military airfield on Russia's southern coast picked up faint signatures moving fast over the Sea of Azov. They assumed seagulls or weather clutter. In reality, it was the next wave of Ukrainian UJ-22 and UJ-26 Beavers threading the airspace at barely 5 meters above the water. Their objective, Russia's largest Shahed 136 storage depot, a launch hub responsible for most of Moscow's drone attacks on Ukraine. If destroyed, Russia's offensive capability could collapse overnight. Primorsk-Akhtarsk was built to be impregnable, a fortress. 4 Tor M2 air defense vehicles formed a perfect diamond around the base, overlapping radar coverage across 5 kilometers. 2 Su-35 fighters circled above their Irbis-E radars, scanning the horizon at full power. On paper, nothing could breach such defenses. Yet Ukraine's planners, drawing on NATO satellite data and battlefield intelligence, had spent weeks modeling this very scenario. What followed was less an attack than a live demonstration of 21st-century drone warfare, a battle between machine intelligence and human reaction time. When the drones came into range, all 4 Tor M2 systems fired simultaneously. 16 9M338 missiles screamed skyward, closing at Mach 2.5. In theory, the engagement box was inescapable. But as the missiles neared, the drones executed a 6G vertical climb, soaring from 180 to 1,200 meters in seconds. The Tor's canard controls stalled at steep angles, unable to match the maneuver. The missiles sailed beneath their targets and exploded harmlessly. One drone was shredded by tungsten fragments, but the rest continued on. Every radar and eye was now pointed skyward, exactly as planned. Unseen and unheard, 4 UJ-26 Beavers skimmed across the coastline 15 seconds later. They had flown 700 kilometers over the Sea of Azov, guided by radar altimeters constantly recalibrating against the choppy waves. At such low altitude ground, radar couldn't detect them beyond 8 kilometers. For 2 hours, they had been ghosts. Their destination, the Shahed storage hangars. At 4:34 a.m., the first drone struck Hangar 2, which held 30 Shahed 136 drones in maintenance cradles, each loaded with 40 kilograms of RDX-based explosives and 50 liters of fuel. The explosion was biblical. The entire hangar lifted before disintegrating mid-air, followed by a chain of detonations in adjacent structures. Within 45 seconds, over 200 Shaheds worth nearly $6 million were vaporized. Al Jazeera's later analysis confirmed that the fireball was visible from satellite orbit for nearly an hour. The chaos paralyzed the base. Pilots attempted emergency scrambles, but smoke reduced visibility to 150 meters below the minimum 200 required for Su-35 takeoff. The airfield's command center lost communication with its defenses. The Guardian cited sources claiming that a single Ukrainian drone effectively neutralized the combat readiness of an entire Russian regiment. Western experts called the raid a masterpiece of timing and precision. DW's defense correspondent noted that this wasn't just destruction, it was strategic paralysis. With one strike, Ukraine had eliminated a major launch center and temporarily silenced the Kremlin's long-range drone threat. The psychological toll was immense. Footage of burning hangars spread across Russian social media before state censors could react. At NATO's Allied Air Command in Ramstein, analysts dissected the mission's telemetry. The conclusion: Ukrainian drones had achieved a kill ratio rivaling Western cruise missiles at less than 1/20th the cost. President Trump's national security team publicly praised the unprecedented precision and cost-effectiveness of the operation, signaling quiet Western approval while stopping short of claiming direct involvement. By morning, Russian media broadcast official statements declaring minor damage and quick restoration. But satellite photos from Planet Labs showed the reality: the entire eastern section of Primorsk-Okhtarsk was a blackened ruin. The attack forced Moscow to begin an emergency relocation of its drone manufacturing stockpiles, an operation that stretched its logistics thin and cost millions in diverted resources. As rescue teams fought to control the inferno, Russian command received chilling new reports. 2 drones were still airborne, flying deep into the country, far beyond any previous Ukrainian reach. Their coordinates pointed to Penza, over 630 kilometers inside Russian territory. Could Ukraine's long-range beavers truly strike that deep? And if so, what target could be worth the risk? Could a handful of $70,000 drones change the fate of a nation's semiconductor industry in a single night? At 4:44 a.m., over Penza, 630 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, that question stopped being theoretical and became a live catastrophe that would echo through Moscow's defense industrial base. The scene read like a Cold War thriller. 2 modified UJ-26 Beavers, their warhead bays repurposed as auxiliary fuel tanks, pushed endurance beyond any published range and threaded Russian airspace. An Su-35 had been vectored on their trail, its Irbis-E radar locked in narrow beam mode, and a pair of R-77 missiles ready to fire. The pilot's move was textbook: engage, fire 2 AMRAAM-class R-77s, and disengage. The missiles did their job. One detonated close enough to shred a drone into aluminum confetti. The other's proximity burst left the wing of the second Beaver badly damaged. Yet the crippled drone kept flying, a testament to both brutal engineering and the mission's audacity. The impact at 4:46 a.m. ruined a building that housed advanced semiconductor fabrication equipment tools worth tens of millions and months of painstaking calibration. This was not just destruction, it was a strategic decapitation of Russia's chip-making timeline. Western and Russian analysts later dissected the strike's mechanics. The R-77's active seeker and the Su-35's tactics are designed to intercept agile aerial targets, and their success rate against small drones is high in controlled engagements. Still, as studies of recent air combat show, extreme maneuvers, high angular velocity, and unpredictable altitude variation can defeat seeker lock or create gimbal and update rate problems for missile seekers, especially against targets that mix aerobatics with very low altitude, high-speed flight. Technical primers on the R-77 confirm its active homing role, but also note that seekers can be stressed by unusually rapid target dynamics. What made Penza different was the target inside the building. The crash did more than punch a hole in concrete. It destroyed clean rooms, electron beam lithography systems, and ion implantation equipment, essential for producing advanced military-grade processors. The loss was immediate, and concrete months of inventory and a facility's worth of capability gone in minutes. Reuters and other outlets have documented how Ukrainian strikes on Russian energy and industrial facilities have forced Moscow into emergency reallocation of defense production and energy logistics effects that ripple across global markets. The strategic implications were seismic. NATO analysts privately told Western media that disabling a single fabrication line could set back Russia's military electronics supply by half a year or more, while triggering a scramble to import components from friendly partners if those partners would risk the diplomatic fallout. In Washington, President Trump's team framed the operation as a demonstration of asymmetric leverage, low-cost, high-impact tools imposing outsized political costs on an adversary, even as the U.S. publicly maintained plausible deniability. European markets reacted within hours. Analysts at Reuters noted renewed upward pressure on refining margins and raised questions about longer-term supply chain resilience. Military experts offered two stark takeaways. First, cheap drones with creative engineering and mission planning can impose strategic effects that once required cruise missiles or airstrikes. Second, defending high-value industrial infrastructure requires more than point defenses. It needs integrated layered sensor fusion and rapid hardened responses that Russia currently lacks or is forced to reassign from frontline duties. A senior NATO analyst told Defense News that the Penza strike would force Moscow into uncomfortable choices, spread its defenses thin to protect factories and refineries, or keep them concentrated on the front and accept more surgical strikes at home. As investigators scraped the site and analysts recalculated timelines, one unnerving fact loomed: if drones could reach Penza and destroy critical semiconductor, tooling what was to stop the same tactic from being used against logistics hubs in Belarus, transshipment points in the Baltics, or even NATO-adjacent critical nodes. The answer would shape the next phase of this conflict and NATO's forward posture. Who will be the first to build a truly resilient, cheap defense grid that can stop swarms before they touch the supply chain? And what will it cost the West to do so? By sunrise, the fires that had burned from Ryazan to Penza painted a single truth across the Russian skyline: the age of invincible infrastructure was over. Overnight, Ukrainian drones, each costing less than the price of a single Russian missile, had paralyzed fuel distribution, obliterated a semiconductor facility, and forced the Kremlin to confront a terrifying new vulnerability. The total estimated economic impact, according to Reuters and Deutsche Welle, exceeded $1.2 billion in direct damage and another $3 billion in disruption costs. But for military planners on both sides of the Atlantic, the true shock was psychological. In Moscow, panic turned to fury. The Ministry of Defense declared that all perpetrators will face inevitable retaliation, while President Putin reportedly convened an emergency meeting with defense industry executives. Russian state media attempted to downplay the losses, but leaked footage first circulated on Telegram, before being scrubbed, showed smoldering refineries and crippled airfields. Analysts at The Guardian and Al Jazeera noted a surge in domestic anger, with even pro-war commentators questioning how NATO-grade defenses could fail so completely. Behind the scenes, Western capitals moved swiftly. NATO's Joint Air Power Competence Center in Germany released a confidential assessment later summarized by Military Watch magazine, arguing that the attacks represented a strategic paradigm shift in air warfare. For the first time, low-cost autonomous systems had demonstrated the ability to conduct multi-domain suppression, neutralizing radar jamming systems and hardened infrastructure in a single coordinated operation. This is the democratization of precision strike, one U.S. Air Force analyst told Defense News. The balance of power now belongs not to those who spend the most, but to those who adapt the fastest. The Trump administration responded with calibrated restraint. Publicly, the president emphasized America's unwavering support for European security and innovation, while privately authorizing an expansion of NATO's Rapid Drone Defense Initiative, a multi-billion-dollar fund to accelerate counter-swarm technologies, AI detection algorithms, and directed energy weapon testing across Poland and Romania. Pentagon sources told Reuters that Washington viewed the Ukrainian success as both an opportunity and a warning. If a handful of drones could cripple a superpower's infrastructure, the U.S. itself must harden its refineries, power grids, and data centers against similar attacks. In the weeks that followed, oil markets convulsed. Brent crude briefly spiked above $100 per barrel before stabilizing while Russia diverted exports eastward, straining its rail and maritime logistics. European utilities scrambled to secure alternative supplies, highlighting once again the fragile interdependence of wartime economies. Economists at the Financial Times warned that even localized drone strikes could now ripple through global energy pricing within hours, a vulnerability that international markets were poorly equipped to absorb. For Ukraine, the strikes became a symbol of technological defiance. Kyiv framed them not merely as retaliation, but as a campaign of deterrence proof that Russia's reach was no longer one-sided. Western defense circles hailed it as the dawn of a new warfare doctrine, distributed offense, where small autonomous units overwhelm large static defenses through speed coordination and data-driven precision. The phrase Ukrainian effect entered NATO briefing rooms as shorthand for this shift. Yet experts also cautioned that Russia's response could escalate the conflict's scope. Analysts at DW reported unusual troop movements near Kaluga and Belgorod, while Western intelligence intercepted discussions of new long-range retaliatory options. The Kremlin, humiliated yet cornered, might soon deploy heavier hypersonic strikes or increase cyber offensives against Western infrastructure. A reminder that technological disruption cuts both ways. As autumn settled over Europe, NATO planners quietly drew a conclusion that echoed across Washington, London, and Warsaw. The future battlefield is no longer dominated by jets and tanks, but by networks of intelligent machines that learn, adapt, and strike faster than politics can react. Could this transformation mark the end of traditional warfare, or the beginning of something even more unpredictable?